the facility shut.
Shut down. Well, we need to get you back on the court.
Yeah, I can't wait. How you doing, Andrew? Thanks for doing it.
I'm good. Good to see you, Ryan and Joe and everyone.
Yeah, good to see you too. So we'll go ahead and get started. It's 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, depending on where you are. I think the only other person that'll be joining us is Chris here in a second. But thanks everyone for jumping on and joining us tonight. I'm pretty excited for the conversation tonight. We've got what I think, from my I'll just go around and start by introducing everyone. First, we've got Scott Cutler, who joined us. Scott's the CEO of StockX, which is a marketplace where you can buy and sell high-value, authenticated items like sneakers or handbags or watches. And Scott, if I saw it right, I think you guys are even selling like PlayStation, exclusive PlayStations on there, right? Too.
You bet.
So cool.
PS5s, Xboxes, trading cards, all things collectibles, current culture. It's been fun.
I'm curious, what's the latest thing you've bought personally on StockX?
Well, I can tell you we're not trading the little Nas Satan shoes from Nike today. That's something we wouldn't be trading on the platform, but I have a penchant for Jordan 1s.
Nice, love it. We've also got Jonathan Johnson with us. Jonathan's the CEO of Overstock.com. Jonathan took over the helm at Overstock. What was it, a year and a half ago, Jonathan?
Yep, that's right.
And he's, he won't tell you this, but he's executed what I think is probably one of the most amazing multi-billion-dollar turnarounds in marketplace history. In a year and a half, the stock price is up, like 3 or 4 times, right, Jonathan?
Oh, a little more than that. A year ago, it was trading at $3. It's in the 60s today, so it's done pretty well.
Holy cow! Pretty amazing work by Jonathan since he took over at Overstock. We've also got Ryan Graves with us. Ryan's the is OG the right term? The original CEO of Uber, and built Uber from basically the very beginning, and then sat on the company's board of directors all the way through the IPO. And Ryan now runs Saltwater Capital. It's a really cool investment fund. And then joining us from the Andreessen team, we've got, Andrew Chen, and actually a fun connection there. Before Andrew became a general partner in Andreessen, he started a small company that turned into a bigger company and then got bought by Uber, where he went on to run growth. So there's a fun connection there between Andrew and Ryan that we may touch on later. And most people probably know him today as one of the top thought leaders on marketplaces. Chris, I saw just join us. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How you doing?
Doing pretty well. Chris is the managing partner at the Cultural Leadership Fund, which is an Andreessen fund designed to advance more African American into technology, which I think is so cool. Proud to have CLF as an investor and neighbor. And we're super excited to have him here today. And then last, Jeff Jordan. Most people I think know Jeff as one of the top marketplace investors in the world. He's invested in Airbnb and Instacart and OfferUp and Pinterest. But I think fewer people know that before he was a general partner at Andreessen, he was the CEO of OpenTable and took them public. And he also ran eBay.com and was the president of PayPal. And so we hope to hear a little more from the operator side from Jeff today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. So just by way of background on this, I'm Joseph Woodbury. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Neighbor. I'll be moderating the conversation today. And really kind of the genesis for this conversation is all of these individuals on the call, they're all investors in Neighbor. And as we're entering kind of our growth phase as a marketplace at Neighbor, I've been thinking about going around to each of these individuals and asking them for their thoughts on how we grow. And it dawned on me that it could be valuable to a lot of people for us to just have that conversation in public. So what we're going to be talking today about is scaling marketplaces and kind of entering that growth phase of a marketplace. And we're doing it on Clubhouse so that really everyone can hear and learn from these people as I want to do today. We're going to try and keep it pretty short and snappy. So we'll go around pretty rapid fire on a lot of these questions. But I just want to start from a high level, and maybe we'll start with Ryan, having been there since the very beginning until you scaled. What would you say are like the main things that changed? What are the main ways your growth strategies changed as you move from just a few markets to the whole country, and then of course globally with Uber?
It's a good question. This is fun. Thanks for setting it up, Joseph. This is going to be interesting. I'll be a listener as much as a contributor for sure here with this group. I would say, just to take a macro view on it, the stages, there's a significant number of them, but a few that come to mind. First is the shift from having or knowing we had product market fit, hunting for it and then knowing we had it. And so, in the earliest days, it was San Francisco and it was a product for VCs and it was expensive, and the evolution towards the P2P model was obviously a huge shift. But even prior to that, when we realized, okay, this is a product that is working across kind of different economic levels. And also we launched in New York, where there's infinite number of transportation alternatives. And we still found a niche, and then Seattle. And I think when Seattle happened as a third city, it was like, okay, we're working in the big cities, working now in a medium-sized city. Maybe this can work in all cities. And so that was a huge shift, kind of realizing, okay, this is an expansion challenge, not a product market fit challenge anymore. And then maybe another phase much later, when for a long time we spent no dollars on marketing, and our kind of regulatory stance and our position in the press got us a lot of growth. And then eventually we had to start spending money on growth, and we looked at driver incentives and even paid marketing, like a traditional paid marketing. And so those are probably two big, meaningful shifts in our go-to-market, I guess.
Yeah, so I was actually just going to add to that really quick, because I think just to abstract the, RG, your kind of timeline, I think one of the really interesting things that you see over and over in marketplace companies is that there's sort of, number one, kind of this like minimum size of a network that you need where you feel good about it and it's stable and it seems like it's working. And in Uber's case, that's a, that might be a city. But it's really interesting whether that's, eBay or OpenTable, and Jeff can speak to all of this stuff. Or you're talking about even, another kind of network effects driven product like Zoom or Slack, where you kind of need to have like 2 or 3 people, in a network in order for it to be viable. That once you kind of know that you can establish this like stable network, then you can kind of figure out how to like copy and paste it into a lot more places. And so I think it's a really interesting recurring theme, because it means that oftentimes something that feels very niche at the beginning ends up becoming big, because you're just kind of like running the same playbook over and over again.
Would both of you say, like, there, because Andrew, you talk about how you figure out a strategy and then you kind of copy paste it to a bunch of places. Is there anything that like actually fundamentally changed, where like things you were doing before just didn't work anymore? Like Andrew, I know you you're coming out with your book, The Cold Start, and one of the things which I'm really excited for, but one of the things that I've been thinking about with that book is like, is there a second cold start, or maybe a better term, like a warm start?
Yeah. Well, I think to what Ryan was saying, and Ryan, feel free to jump in, is that once it seems like it's working and it's kind of growing organically, you end up in a state where you're like, oh, I actually want this to grow like 200% a year or 300% a year, not just 100% a year. And or what ends up happening is you start your whole network, your marketplace ends up getting really big, and it tends to slow down a little bit because it's growing a little bit more like linearly than exponentially. And so once you do that, then, Joseph, to your point of view, it's like, you basically have to that's where you put in paid marketing. That's where you start, needing to layer on new kinds of product innovations in order to keep up that super high rate of growth. And that's why the Ubers and all of these different marketplace companies end up needing to hire a lot of people to continue amplifying what's already working. It's not just like network effects kick in and then the whole thing kind of just takes care of itself.
I'm glad you said. Yeah, Jeff, go for it.
I would also add that oftentimes that phrase network effects is obviously like this holy grail. Everyone's searching for it. Does this thing have network effects? But it's not necessarily the case that network effects are always positive. And as a marketplace grows, as liquidity increases, in Uber's case, pickup times become lower and the experience becomes more magical. One button and you go. But at the end of the day, there could be negative network effects, and you have to make sure the product experience is actually ramping positively with greater scale, with greater liquidity.
I mean, I was going to double click on that too. I mean, one growth strategy is marketing, paid marketing, content marketing, different ways. A growth strategy that worked great for me as an operator was a product, just improving the functionality of the business and adding new functionality to the business. I did a blog, my first blog post, I think, was Layers of the Cake, where at eBay, we started with eBay.com, and then we layered in eBay International, then we layered in PayPal. So each one of those accelerated growth, but even within eBay.com, we layered in Buy It Now, then we layered in stores, layered in great payments integration. And each one of those big product boosts accelerated growth in total. Our best growth strategy was more product related than marketing related at the time.
That's actually really interesting. And I think, you can run into a bad situation if you just keep trying to layer on, acquisition layers to the cake, and you don't try to layer on actual product innovation to the cake. Scott, I want to pull you into this because I don't think I mentioned it when I introduced you, but you started out as an investor with StockX, right? And then kind of joined the company over time. So you've also seen StockX basically since the very beginning. What are the things you've noticed have changed?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, for me, StockX has been somewhat serendipitous.
Hey, Scott, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Entire career, because the business, in fact, the first press releases that is that better?
Yeah, that's
better. I was going to say, so it was somewhat serendipitous in the sense that I found StockX on the day that they announced the company, which was, building a new marketplace based on the principles of the New York Stock Exchange, StubHub, and eBay, all places that I had the opportunity to be at. And, I guess what I saw in the company, and maybe building on Jeff's point, was a company that had really built out liquidity around this idea of stock market of things, starting with sneakers. And, the product experience is just so frictionless in the buying and selling of the things that we now call assets in the category that it's transformed the industry. So it's just taken another evolution of marketplaces that already existed and created one that was, less friction than the one before it, which was largely eBay in the categories in which we operate. And so that idea that even in a marketplace with significant liquidity, another one can come around that's a better, more frictionless experience for buyers and sellers has really been the reason that StockX has just exploded globally.
Got it. I want to kind of talk about one of those layers of the cake that Jeff talked about and kind of double click into it. And that is, you reach a certain point where I think you start to think more about the brand and the community that you're creating. At the start, at least how it's been for Neighbor is you're just like, how can we get users? Whoever we can get, wherever we can get them. If I go back to the very early days, knocking doors, to try and, what's the type of community we want to build? What's the type of brand we want to have? Jeff, I want to go back to you on this one. Like, how did you think about developing this while you were at OpenTable? Pretty unique marketplace. Like, how did you win that space, really?
Yeah, it is OpenTable. It's actually funny. Back at eBay, we cared a lot about the brand and put a lot of focus on it. It was a community-driven marketplace, and kind of the first one. So we were, writing the playbook and making it up as we went along. So that was interesting. But brand early at eBay was a big deal. At OpenTable, the brand was around efficiency, and so it wasn't, people would say, I love OpenTable, but why do you love OpenTable? So I don't have to pick up the damn phone and call 19 restaurants to get a reservation. So it was a very, it was an interesting thing. And the purchase is so episodic for most people. Some people pre-COVID used to dine out, our power users would dine out, twice every weekend. But the mean diner dined like 2 or 3 special occasions a year. We got a Mother's Day, birthday, and anniversary or something. And so that, our biggest challenge was the very low frequency of the average user in working it. And it made it also really hard to do paid marketing, because it was really hard to convince someone who wasn't planning to dine out to dine out.
That's really interesting. And ultimately, I mean, you mentioned as an exception that like OpenTable, their brand was around efficiency, but I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot, is that part of your brand can be a product value prop. In fact, if your brand isn't built around your value provided to the customer, you're probably building an empty brand. Which I want to bring Chris into this. Chris, I know in addition to everything you do with CLF, you've also worked with a lot of companies, both with inside Andreessen and out, thinking about their influencer strategy and how they can bring influencers in to build that brand that they want. If you're talking to a company that's just raised, $50-100 million, like how do you tell them to think about this so they do it right and carefully?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think these are conversations that we have across all different scales, whether it's your first check-in or, companies, one round before going public. And I think the narrative is always the same. And you have to always kind of think about what those shared values are, and really always try and think about what the vision and the brand for the company and the story and the narrative that you want to be told externally. I think it's also always important to know that, a strategic investor, whether it's someone that's, focused on the influence side or really organically aligned with the values and business that you're doing, that's all that's going to do is enhance what you already have. So, we always say shared genius is always, one of the first ways to really help consider kind of how you're thinking about different markets. So say, for example, and this is one of the conversations we had, you're looking at going after new territories and new markets, and how do you find somebody that also understands and has had similar pain points to your business that can naturally and organically resonate? And then an even deeper level is that, are they also, working or from a region or a territory that you're actually interested in pursuing as your next additional market? So that way it's a double-edged sword where you can have somebody that can, speak the company's values and the company's mission, while at the same time feeling that they're also supporting the community that they've been a part of from their upbringing at the exact same time. And so, and that way, you're getting a great investors who's organically interested in supporting your business. B, you're getting somebody that also really resonates with the product and has a story that could be complementary to the underlying narrative of the business that that you're currently doing. And C, you just have somebody that's just genuinely interested in helping you grow, regardless of whether or not this is a financial return that's going to change the world. I think you want people who are naturally interested and ready to help support you. And I think that you want to always find those individuals that genuinely care and also have additional insights on markets and product that you might not know. I mean, through the Culture Leadership Fund, we really focus on shared genius, where we believe a lot of the people within our network are experts in specific verticals that many of our portfolio founders might not necessarily have insights into, and then vice versa, where our founders can be complementary to creating a halo effect for many of the network that we're supporting too. And so when we get these opportunities to really bring these worlds together, that's when we get a chance to see something that's greater than anything that we can have exist. And so, whether that's consumer companies like Neighbor or other products that are really trying to try and add an extra spark to the business. But at the end of the day, you have to really kind of think about your product as, hey, this is going to go into the mainstream at some point if you're doing what you're supposed to do. So let's have somebody that naturally and organically resonates with the business.
What's the best example of you if you've seen this done, or the best couple examples? Like, sometimes it's hard for me to envision like exactly when I'm plotting out like what does this look like for Neighbor. It's just hard for me to say, here's what it needs to look like. Like, here's the gold standard.
Marie Kondo, getting all the crap out of your house and into storage.
That's
exactly.
Right.
Absolutely. I think that's a great example. I think, like I remember we were talking about, LA being one of the next markets, like when you did the Series A as one of your top markets. So then you think about, okay, well, what region within LA? And then I remember we talked about, South Central was one of the regions that you saw was going to have a strong pickup. And so, okay, so now you're looking even more specific into South Central. Now, who's somebody that's within the South Central market that has a home, deeply connected to the community, can understand the value proposition that you're selling, that then you can then create a natural conversation with, to where they're equally looking at their business and their endeavors from an investor and an entrepreneurial community. I mean, we'll just use say like a Tiffany Haddish, for example, right? Like, she's from South Central. She understands investing. She knows entrepreneurship. She's creative. And how do you create do a partnership with her to basically introduce the product to the community in a way that's natural, organic. It's a win-win solution, because that's the best part about Neighbor, is that like you guys actually are helping create new income opportunities, and you're helping create a platform for people who don't necessarily have enough space, or looking to find alternative solutions to storage facilities. And so when you can show, hey, this is a good business, this helps the community, this is a unique opportunity to make money, and just by taking your space and allowing somebody else to rent, like that's a super awesome idea. And now you have the visualization and the connected community that goes together. And that's a great story. And you're also doing something great for the people that are tapping in. So
I love that.
Hey Joseph,
I love
the
that.
other thing I was gonna just mention is, I think just something that you see about kind of new marketing channels and growth channels is sometimes they just don't fit with every product as well, but sometimes when it does really align, it can be magical. I mean, I think one kind of new marketplace that's recently been developed is like, you look at Cameo, right? And that's like literally the most like creator economy thing you could possibly imagine, because you actually have the you know, the celebrities and content creators on there, not only creating a kind of halo and brand around the whole thing, but also like they actually get the demand side in the platform when the content goes viral. And so I think that's the other interesting thing is like for Neighbor, because there's an online offline element, that's kind of its own thing. But for the purely digital marketplaces, it may turn out that the influencers and celebrities are even more powerful in that case.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. You can't. That's probably the best lesson is that you cannot force any of this stuff. It has to be very organic, and if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you don't have an incredible company. It just means that you have to wait for the right moment for things to come together.
Joseph, if I may, you know, I think when you're talking about organic growth of your marketplace, and we've been talking about different ways to market, I think any fledgling marketplace and mature marketplace really needs to focus on two things. One is a great and easy to use customer experience. And you know, you think about the early days of eBay, its customer experience was bringing people together who had stuff that they had, you know, wouldn't know who would buy it, and people who wanted that stuff and they didn't know where they could get it. And eBay provided that great customer experience. Second thing I think you have to do as you focus on operations is what kind of value are you giving to both ends of your marketplace, the seller of your good and the buyer of your goods. And I think of Overstock's earliest days, when we were still a liquidator, something we're no longer, the value we provided to people that had product to liquidate was a channel they could do it that didn't create channel pollution. And the value that we provided to our customers was to be able to get product, new, but last year's product at a great value. You provide value and you provide a great and easy to use customer experience, your marketplace is going to flourish.
Jonathan, I'm actually, while we're talking about this, I'm actually curious. You know, we were talking at the start how you've basically turned around Overstock in the last year and a half, and I think you confronted some of these challenges of like, you know, maybe having to correct some things on a brand perspective. Like, how did you do that? What did that look like over the last year and a half? Like, what were kind of some of the tactical things you were like, we can do this to really improve our marketplace, because it worked?
Well, you know, if I had to pick one word, it would be focus. And I think so many startups, as well as more mature companies, get in trouble because of indigestion rather than starvation. They're trying to do too many things. They're at the buffet and they're eating everything. There's lots of good ideas and they can't get them done. You know, when I took over as Overstock CEO, we had 27 strategic initiatives. And having 27 key things you're working on is like having no things you're working on. And so we boiled that down, honed it to 4 things that we said we were going to focus on. And it let us get, you know, strong legs so that when what turned out to be for us, the tailwinds of the pandemic started to blow, we could really pedal fast and pedal hard. I think you build a brand by focusing on what you do best and pivoting to things you think you can do better than what you're doing now. For example, when Overstock first started, we were a liquidator. But then our suppliers said, well, gee, selling so much of our stuff, we'd like you to sell this year's mainstream goods. And we became a general merchandiser because we'd solved one problem so well for a constituency that they asked us to solve another.
That focus is I think kind of, I'll just add my own 2 cents here, that like, that is what marketplaces are essentially based off of. I've heard Jeff talk before about how a lot of the marketplaces that have been created over the last year essentially took a piece of eBay's pie and they just focused in on it. They just did it really well. You have Instacart that took over the grocery delivery aspect. You have StubHub that peeled off the tickets aspect. You have all these companies that came along and focused, But at the same, I actually want to ask you, Ryan, like, what's the right balance here? Because Uber is a company I think of, and in some ways they kind of didn't focus, and they had some big wins with Uber Eats, but like they also had, there was a time there at Uber where it was like, we've got Uber, Uber Black and Uber Car and Uber Eats and Uber Chopper and Uber Freight. And like, how do you balance that focus? And was it the right thing to do, going broad like that?
Well, looking at the breakout of the business today, it's hard to argue it was the wrong thing to do. I will say that I will say that, when Travis and I brought Jason Droege in, it was, he had the very clear mandate to operate like a separate organization and not distract the core. And I think allowing for a new effort inside of a company to operate with that autonomy is pretty critical. And so it didn't feel like a distraction to the quote core business at all. And then remember that there was years of trying models in the food space that didn't work until identifying one that did. And so I think at the end of the day, the focus is critical, and it really never felt like a balance because it was so autonomous. We were also at a size that you could justify that level of, side project, side hustle for the company.
And do
I
you
was
think
also
you
just
need
going to add to Ryan's answer that one of the interesting things is a lot of the different kinds of trips that you could take in the actual core rides app, whether that was like Uber helicopter or Ryan will remember like Uber puppies, and like Uber moto and a lot of these things. The really interesting thing there was those were all ultimately kind of ways of getting from point A to point B. And the app was created in such a way where the local city teams could actually configure it and set up kind of new naming schemes. And they could kind of like create new kinds of trips by working with drivers on the ground. And so it was a really interesting kind of like templatized way to be able to allow the various local teams to be able to add new SKUs, basically. So at least for the rideshare business, it probably looked like there was a lot more randomness and craziness than what was actually happening. Because the local teams were just kind of like going nuts creatively, and that really helped. A lot of these are ultimately marketing stunts, but it certainly helped spike a lot of the metrics in the early years.
Yeah, so as long as it aligns with kind of your core offering, you're still focused even though it's different lines.
Yeah, like I think it's so cool that like you look at a marketplace like early eBay, the fact that the listings format was just so flexible, and you could just watch the emergent behavior come out of the templates and then kind of like build new verticals off of it. I think there's something really powerful in aggregating like that level of variety.
I mean, it's a fascinating thing that that definitely was true at eBay, where we had a whole lot more success watching what the community was doing and enabling it than we did trying to steer the community to where we wanted it to go, where we thought it wanted to go. And so Airbnb was essentially the same way too. It started as a very narrow concept. eBay was, collectibles. I still have Jeff Shell and Pierre's original business plan for eBay, and it was targeted at the collectibles market. The Airbnb was, stay on an airbed in someone's apartment, and then the community they had the functionality broad enough that the community could do other things on it. And on Airbnb they started listing full homes and igloos and tree houses and things like that. At one point, Airbnb had tons of cars on it that were being offered to rent for the day. And they, one potential growth vector they had was, do we go sharing economy broad or do we stay with travel? And so, enabling the community to give you signal is a great growth strategy. I agree with Andrew completely.
How did they make that decision? Just coming back to this focus question, how did they decide to just stick with travel versus going broad? Because it's hard to turn that opportunity down, especially if you're having a bunch of people listing cars and things. Like, how do you decide not to go after that?
I think Brian made the decision that the travel category was so big and Airbnb's opportunity in it it was so large that he kind of ended up his guiding strategy was for years and years ago. He had a Pixar animator help them with a film strip of the journey for both the host and the guest, and they then mapped out where they participated in that journey. And then they mapped out where they could participate in that journey. And Brian's a big fan of Walt Disney and the Disney company. And it was really interesting to use the film strip as strategy, because he has done adjacencies to the trip. When you're on the trip, you often do things. That's the experience product. He's played around with okay, you have to fly to and from many of your destinations, at least pre-COVID. That could be an air strategy. So it was a really interesting strategic discussion. And I think it was a kind of one of those company defining strategic discussions, and he went for travel, and it's done pretty well.
So I want to throw out a new topic here. With COVID, we've unlocked a completely new remote world where you're seeing a lot of companies like Twitter and Pinterest and others start to say we're going to be, remote companies and getting out of their office leases and that sort of thing. And I think it's made people start to ask the question, could these marketplace concepts be done outside of the Bay Area? But if you look at the Marketplace 100 list that Andreessen just put together, what is it, like 90% of the companies are located in the Bay Area, 90+%. And so we have two CEOs on here, Scott and Jonathan. I want to get your perspectives on this of like, how do you build, because both of you have built marketplaces. StockX is based out of Detroit. Overstock is based out of Utah. So what are your thoughts on building a marketplace outside of the Bay Area?
I guess I'll jump in. Yeah, so I think you're blending a couple of comments that you made. Yeah, so StockX had its early beginnings headquartered in Detroit, and that's the place we'll continue to call headquarters as we build out now a global company. But I think for us, maybe different than most tech companies, is that we're not only a tech company, but we have a lot of operations and supply chain and logistics that we manage around the world. And so that has been an incredible challenge operating through the pandemic, where we have frontline workers that are in authentication centers around the world that are in the office or in that center every single day operating. And so as we look at being both a tech company as well as a company with pretty intense operations around the world, we look at sort of three things. One, keeping to our roots of being able to hire great talent in our functional areas in Detroit. Number two, be able to create a workplace for our frontline workers that's safe and scalable. And number three, to be able to operate now, which we have through the pandemic, in a more flexible hybrid approach. And that mostly applies to those people that don't have to be in an authentication center every day. And in that world, I think that's going to be the thing that we're all going to be testing with CEOs, that right mix of in-person and remote and flexibility. I think we're going to be way more productive than we were going into the pandemic, because we'll have figured out new ways of working, new ways to be productive, new ways to connect. And certainly I think for us, the pandemic, our business is more than doubled in the last 18 months. And we've been able to find great talent, hire great talent, open up centers remotely, and be able to run our business globally, not having met in person. And that's been a challenge, but we've been able to do that. And I think we're going to hope to bring a lot of those key aspects to us, as we kind of get back into a world where we can work together physically. But I think it's going to be in that hybrid way. But I do think today, post-pandemic, you're probably able to build a company and attract talent from the best centers of excellence around the world, and not have to be headquartered in the Silicon Valley or somewhere else where there's always been a place where, hey, this is where tech companies are built.
Do you think you're at a disadvantage at all? Like, is there a higher barrier to overcome, or is it like totally equal playing field?
Well, I think when you're requiring people to work in specific locations, and I think that's even become way more micro now, in that, even if you're in the Silicon Valley and you're a company that says, hey, we're going to require you to be in the office, that may be a limiter to be able to get great talent. And I think this new hybrid approach that's also going to be fairly flexible as to where people are going to work is going to reduce the barrier of starting great companies, like I said, in a more hybrid environment. And that's the way I see it playing out, around the world. So, you're going to be hiring great talent, almost without borders, where you can. And again, particularly focused on those workers that can work in a remote way.
Joseph, we're Overstock, 21 years headquartered in Utah. I think wherever you're choosing to locate, and this is particularly true pre-pandemic, you're focused on talent. And talent means, as Scott has said, you're just maniacally focused on talent. Talent means management talent. It certainly means tech talent. It usually means sales talent. You talk about knocking on doors in your early days at Neighbor. That's sales talent. And it also means industry expertise. And so you've got to see, are there people in the area where you're choosing to locate and call home people in those groups? And if you're setting up a car sharing company, like a new marketplace like Avail is doing that in a place where there's good understanding of the rental car business and the insurance business, you can probably do that in Chicago or something like that. I do think in the post-pandemic world, location will be less and less important to attracting and retaining talent. In fact, I think you're going to have to be kind of an anti-location, an anti-headquarter company to be able to attract and retain the best talent. So I think where you're located is kind of important, but it's not nearly as important as the product you're developing and the product that you're selling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, especially within the CLF, when we've been really focused on building out ecosystems outside of the Silicon Valley area, I think what you'll really start to see is that, just the increase of people that will actually, reach out and be considered to want to work at Neighbor or any company specifically, because now you don't have that forcing function of saying you have to live in Silicon Valley, and some of the world's best, like, yes, there's a the ultimate network effect within the Bay Area, but I think that there's great talent all around the country and even broader within the entire world. And so by opening up that door to say, hey, we just want to have great people who will roll up their sleeves and make an impact to the business and the community, and have the culture that you're really trying to develop within the organization. That's really going to be one of the key starting points to really trying to expand that pie and really double down on finding great talent that you never know. It's not necessarily the fact that people don't necessarily want to move to Silicon Valley to go and get a position, go and bring their world into the startup land. I mean, sometimes it's family issues, sometimes it's personal reasons, sometimes someone might have bought a home in a different city, and so now you're eliminating these barriers. And also over the past year, we've just seen just that we're living in a technology-enabled world where we don't have to necessarily meet in person all the time, although that there are ways that you can really figure out scenarios to get the best of both worlds. So I'm super excited, and I think even from our standpoint, within the CLF, we've seen a ton of connection points and opportunities to really double down and bring people into our portfolio companies that traditionally would have been much limited if they were only focused on one specific region.
Hey, Chris, how's Miami?
You know, I have no complaints about Miami at all. And it's funny because, you know, if you guys listen really closely, I can, you know, you can hear me splashing in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the spring breakers. Spring breakers are all over the place.
Oh yeah, well, you know, they're just only here for the spring, so that's the only. That's when I come.
I was just going to add on the geography thing. I do think that it's hard to talk about marketplaces in generalities just because, you know, each one is so different than another. But I do think that there is a reason that, you know, rideshare and food delivery and some of the really ultra high burn marketplace you know, models over the last 10 years were in the Bay Area, where there was like very clear access to a lot of capital because you needed, you know, billions of dollars to scale one of these things. Versus I'm a lot more optimistic that, you know, in the future, as you know, content creators and the creator economy becomes more of a thing, and we'll see business models kind of based around that'll create opportunities for, you know, for LA to become ascendant. And, you know, there's also a lot of kind of B2B kind of, you know, trucking, like the convoys and the, you know, other folks in the world where it's really important to be next to ports and next to, you know, big logistical hubs. And so I do think that one thing to think about, you know, when it comes to marketplace companies is, you know, for whatever type of company that you're going to create, what's really the bottleneck in getting in solving the cold start problem and scaling it. And the more that it's like capital and software engineers, the more it's going to be a Bay Area thing. And the more that it's, you know, something else, then, you know, then you'll have advantages in other regions as well.
That's a good framework. And we've definitely seen an increased willingness to move to, like, a lot has been said about remote workers, but just in the last year, I mean, we've recruited from New York, Florida, Texas, Southern California, Northern California, and all of those people we're actually a headquarter centric model. We require everyone to be here in Utah, and all of those people have relocated to Utah. And so I think there's a much bigger palette, you know, among people to relocate to new geographies these days and to kind of experience new geographies, which I think is really cool. We've got a couple more topics that we want to cover. We have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to go through these pretty rapidly. The first is want to touch briefly on trust and safety. And then I want to end on profitability. We'll talk about that in a second. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough with marketplaces. But first on trust and safety, love to start with Jeff here, who you've seen trust and safety at, you know, you've run in trust and safety at several different marketplaces now. How did that look different, and how did those problems start to arise? And everyone who contributes here, feel free to share war stories on this one.
Yeah, this is you know, I invested in an enterprise security company, and everyone looked at me like, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Well, I've lost more money to you know, trust and safety than almost anyone else on the planet between eBay and PayPal. So you know, I became an expert that way. It's actually a badge of honor. You know, early on, most concepts don't have bad trust and safety issues, except for I remember the one that let people rent you know, really high-end cars, and that early on some of those cars never came back. So you know, sometimes they happen early, but typically they happen when liquidity shows up, when you have sufficient liquidity that it's worth the fraudster's time, because the fraudsters are just making a mathematical calculation. How much work do I put into defrauding on this platform, and how much money do I get back? So the job of the trust and safety group is to make that calculus way more expensive for the fraudster, you know, increase the time and reduce the yield, and figure it out. I mean, at eBay, just a really simple example. Early on, we didn't have any trust and safety. People would set up an account, say they had something expensive to sell, take the money, and then run. And so we started figuring out ways that, you know, okay, these are the hoops you have to jump through before you could sell an expensive item. And that they would then reverse engineer that, sell their, you know, $10 items, and then offer the $1,000 items and take the money and run. So we figured that out and made it harder. So it was just back and forth battling. And, you know, at one point we finally made it so hard to set up a new account and defraud someone, that the fraudsters had the very good idea of stealing accounts and using past reputation to enable them to sell really expensive stuff and take the money and run. And that essentially started phishing. I mean, that's where phishing. I first came to be aware of it because, you know, we had pretty much made it really expensive to try to steal money from a new account. So they started stealing money from existing accounts. So, you know, it's a when and not an if, that when you get high liquidity, people will fraudsters will come and try to steal your money.
So is it mostly reactive? Like, is that basically the approach you have to take, is like it happens, then you build a system, or can you be proactive before it happens?
Oh, I mean, you want to be proactive, but it ends up being an arms race. You know, just you get success. You successfully respond to a fraud vector, and the computer engineers. Typically, when I was at eBay, most of the fraud was out of Eastern Europe because they had very, very talented computer scientists that didn't have a lot of opportunity. And so, you know, they were very, very good at probing your defenses and finding gaps and exploiting them. So, you know, you want to be as proactive as you can. And then, you know, trust and safety inherently is two things. One is it's safety. It's, you know, it's hard, you're unlikely to lose money on this platform. And then the other part is the perception that it is safe, and that's the trust part. And they're both really important. So, but, you know, it fundamentally has to start with safety. You have to make it trading on that platform more safe, and that then increase the cost for fraudsters, and hopefully they go somewhere else.
So, Ryan, it sounds like it's going to happen. You know, it's just there's no way of avoiding it. So then there's that second piece Jeff talked about, is trust and kind of the PR side of things. How do you, Ryan, I'm curious at your takes, like, as you dealt with stuff over time at Uber, what was the best way to, like, take a situation that did happen and make it, you know, you didn't stop it from happening, but like make it better now that it did happen?
Well, I guess I would start with, we didn't always do that perfectly, but from a lessons applied perspective, I would say it's like anything. You just have to be authentic with what you're handling. So I would start with the specific scenario, and if the individual who is most effective walks away saying, "Hey, the company looked out for me," that's how you're gonna one, learn the most from the situation, but also the reality of the story is so much more important than the PR and the scaled story, primarily because, you know, truth matters. And so eventually that will scale. You do have to have some skill in ensuring the truth gets out. You can't just handle it with the one-off case or person, or, you know, in our case, driver or rider or whatever, and just not worry about the rest. You do have to worry about how the story gets out. But I think that's a starting point. And then just really thinking through the application of the lesson and having a discipline around postmortems is just a critical thing to make sure that the lesson scales within an organization.
So as a marketplace, do you just need to be prepared to, you know, is that just a reality of running a marketplace, is you just need to be prepared to make some payouts and reparations?
Well, that could be the case. It depends on the marketplace. But at the end of the day, we would say often that if it happens in a city, it's likely to happen in an Uber. Like, at some scale, you're going to see some gnarly stuff on your platform. And so you can't fix all the bad things in the world. You should certainly take preventative measures, but, you know, the world is a beautiful place and sometimes can be a dark place. And those things are going to happen on whatever platform you're offering the world once you reach a certain scale.
Love it. I love the.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to add, I mean, you know, this is another, you know, there's a lot we could talk about on this, but, you know, I guess when relating it a little bit to StockX, and I think when you think about just the experience overall, is at the end of the day, you're really trying to make a great customer experience for your buyer and your seller. And, you know, I think the challenges with many marketplaces, at least the first generation of marketplaces, is that the best you could do in that type of experience that was trust eroding was, you know, in eBay, it was the money back guarantee program, which actually did increase trust. StubHub, it was the make it right program, was so if you didn't get into the event, you got your money back. for StockX, it's been authenticated. Before the buyer actually even gets the item, StockX has done its job to authenticate that item, thereby eliminating those bad buyer experiences. But I do think as a marketplace, you have to be able to decide what are you willing to tolerate in terms of bad buyer experience or bad seller experience, and do everything that you can to make those go away. And if you can, and you can be successful in creating a highly trusted experience, then you become the platform for choice. And so, Neighbor is a great example, to the extent that you're able to deliver through the marketplace a better experience that's trusted, where it's a great experience for your customer, then you will replace the better part of the, today, which is the better part of the storage market, because you'll be offering a marketplace experience where access is cheaper and better, but you're able to deliver a higher trusted experience, and then you own the market when you've been able to do that. And so I think trust and safety is at the critical center of most marketplaces, or successful ones.
Yeah, just to reinforce something Scott said that I agree with strongly is, the when you really focus on trust and safety is when you put your cash on the line. I was at eBay when we introduced buyer protection, and that was for certain trades we would stand behind it. At Airbnb, we put in the Airbnb buyer guarantee. That we debuted it at $50,000 for hosts. It quickly went up to $1 million. When you have got $1 million at risk per night, you start paying a lot of attention to it, and you start getting really good at it. So it's a really good forcing function on the consumer experience to have the platform stand behind it and take it seriously.
Joseph, I think trust and safety need to be a number one priority if you're building a marketplace business. And, just like, I think it was Ryan that says, if it happens in a city, it happens in an Uber. And if it's happened in an Uber, there's probably a tendency to want to create a policy for it. And all of a sudden, you can create this bramble bush of policies that get so big that they're hard to enforce. At Overstock, what we did is our policies got too big, and we were trying to focus on trust and safety. Is we told our customer care agents, really the enforcer and the interaction with all of our customers, we said, you got to do justice by the customer. Not that the customer is always right, but you got to do justice by them. So if a customer buys a diamond ring and returns it and wants a full refund, but our gemologist has said it was a cubic zirconium ring they returned, then you don't give them their refund. There are a lot of ways to do justice. If someone buys a couch and one of the legs is a little short, you can refund the money, you can send them a new leg, you can give them a discount and tell them to put a book under the short leg. There's a lot of ways that customers will be happy with justice and feel the trust of the company. And so I think having simpler rules to provide trust and safety to your customers and provider is really important as you're making it a number one priority.
It's essentially, I think that's a good note to end on. Like, it's essentially what you sell as a marketplace. When you really boil it down, you're of course providing a community, you're providing the place, the liquidity, you're providing the transaction, but really what you're selling as the marketplace is that trusted transaction. You're enabling the peer-to-peer interaction to happen. So I'm glad we ended on that. We're right at time. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Chris and Andrew and Jeff and Ryan and Scott and Jonathan. This was awesome.
How often profitability is forgotten.
Yeah. How often profitability is forgotten. That's
what's
next
that?
episode.
What's
that? Yeah, go ask the SaaS companies.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks,
Awesome. See you guys.
Let's do it again.
Great chat.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
See ya.
Thanks all.
Peace.